Religion had played a major role in the life of the ancient Egyptians and in the advancement which their civilization had achieved. For if it wasn't for their belief in the life after death, they wouldn't have built those giant pyramids and these temples, which took some of them hundreds of years to build. And they couldn't have cut out these tombs in the rocks, with depths of some of them reaching more than 100 meters under the ground. The ancient Egyptian believed in resurrection and immortality, meaning that he lives in the first life, then dies, to live again in the other world. The Egyptian had reached this concept through his observation to some natural phenomena that were repeated in his life. The sun rises and shines, then sets, then rises again. The plant grows and is harvested, then grows again. The Nile, which is the giver of life, floods, then resides, then floods again. All these phenomena and others made the Egyptian imagine that he'll pass through the same stages, the stage of creation, then death, and finally the stage of recreation again. The ancient Egyptians believed that life is nothing but a continuous circle of birth, childhood, youth, aging, death, and rebirth. And to achieve it, certain elements had to be well preserved, including the body, which needed to be mummified and placed in a good coffin that carries the feature of the deceased, to make it easy for the soul to recognize it when the time comes for it to dwell in its owner. The coffin depended on the wealth and social class of the deceased. For example, the anthropoid coffin of Pa-di Amon, the high priest of Amon, is composed of a body and its lid. The interior and exterior are covered with religious scenes of deities and sacred texts and signs, and the deceased himself praising the gods. God Anubis is a jackal-headed god who sits at the gates of the tombs and guards the cemetery. His black color symbolizes death. He also watches over the process of mummification, and thus he is called the Lord and Protector of the necropolis. Goddess Nephthys is a lady of the house, and her crown states her name, Nebet-Het. She mourns the deceased with her sister Isis and protects him with her long wings. Before the body is buried, it had to be taken on a boat to make a pilgrimage to Abydos temple, where god Osiris, the god of the dead, resides. Two women of the family reincarnate goddesses Isis and Nephthys and mourn him. All these rituals combined are basics of the creed of immortality, by which the ancient Egyptian conquered his fear of death, knowing that it doesn't terminate life. The royal mummies of two pharaohs were put on display in Luxor Museum in March 2004 as a part of the new extension to the museum, which includes a small visitor center. One of them belongs to King Amasis I. It's on display in the hall called the Glory of Egypt, as King Amasis I achieved the greatest glory for Egypt when he fought and defeated the Hyksos, who had been occupying Egypt for 100 years, during which Theban princes ruled in the south, and Amasis was one of them. The other mummy is said to belong to King Ramesses I, who ruled during the 19th dynasty in 1306 BC. The mummy was stolen from Egypt long time ago and sold at first to the Museum of Niagara Falls, then to Carlos in Atlanta in the United States. Successfully, Egypt managed to get it back where it belongs. The gold collar of courage was offered to Queen Iyahotep, who ruled in the 18th dynasty. It was found in her tomb in Dera Abu Najah cemetery in the west bank of Luxor. Sobek the crocodile was a god to whom many temples in Egypt were dedicated, as well as a whole city in Fayum called Crocodilopolis. His priests used to sing hymns daily, asking him for his blessings. The main temple where he was worshipped as a principal god is in Komombo city. Certain crocodiles were chosen to be raised up in the temple. They wore golden earrings, and their feet were decorated with bracelets made of precious stones. When they died, they were mummified and placed in sacred coffins. A room in the temple was found filled nearly to the ceiling with mummified crocodiles, all representing God Sobek. The mummies and coffins of the priests of god Ammon, found in El Deir el-Bahari in 1881, dated from the 21st and 22nd dynasties. Masaharti was a high priest of Ammon and the general of the army and the son of Pai-Nejem I. His mummy, which is in a perfect condition, is displayed in his coffin. The coffin lid is completely painted in rich, accurate details of religious scenes that show some gods like Goddess Nut, the sky goddess, and the winged scarabs that represent fertility and eternal cycle of life. The inscriptions tell Masaharti's titulary and epithets. Keeping the body in an intact position by mummifying it and having its features plain and clear would make it easier for the spirit to find it and dwell in it in another world. That's how everyone in ancient Egypt looked for immortality and did all what was possible to achieve it. He shall come forth by day, he shall rise up to walk upon the earth among the living, and he shall never fail and come to an end, never, never, never. That was verse number 31 in the last chapter of the Book of the Dead. This sentence summarizes the motive which lay behind the Egyptian practice of mummification. This motive has been a subject of interest for over 3,000 years. The tombs of the Mountain of the Dead in Siwa were subjected to grand robberies since antiquity. According to Brown, one of the early visitors of the oasis, upon his visit in 1792, he found most of the tombs opened and the remaining of hundreds of skeletons and bones scattered around, with pieces of skin and even hair attached to them. Hornman, the second visitor of Siwa, was so interested in mummies. However, he mentioned that the locals found gold in the tombs and sabotaged them looking for it. Nevertheless, we find scenes relieved on the wall of the tombs describing the complete operation of mummification, including all the religious rituals that accompanied it. For example, in the tomb of Si Amon, we see his mummy lying down on the mummification bed, while the priest who wears god Anubis' mask performs the rituals. His wife, represented as goddess Isis, stands at the head of the mummy. Nephthys, her sister, stands by his feet, and behind her stand the 4 children of Horus. They guard the internal organs which were to be extracted. In front of Si Amon, there is a box that contained the tools of opening the mouth of the deceased, while his elder son wears the tiger leather and holds with both hands these tools. All the mummies that were found in the Mountain of the Dead belong to the Roman period. They were not well mummified, but the way they were prepared for burials was no different from the method used in the Nile Valley. In other words, the Syrians became totally Egyptians in their beliefs and burial traditions in the Greek-Roman period, just like the dwellers of the Nile Valley. Mummification has always been the greatest scientific achievement of the ancient Egyptian. No wonder he kept it as a sacred, mysterious operation prohibited to be known and practiced except by specialist priests. Some of the materials used were left in tombs, especially the liquids that surrounded organs. At first, the body was soaked in natron salt to dehydrate it and melt the fats from 40 to 70 days. The belly was emptied from its organs, which were placed in 4 jars. They are the stomach, the liver, the intestines, and the lungs. These jars are called the canopic jars. Their lids take the shapes of the 4 children of Horus. They are Amsti, who has a human head guarding the liver, Habi, with a monkey's head for the lungs, Duwamut F, the jackal, for the stomach, and the last Qebh Sinu F, the falcon, to protect the intestines. The tools are composed of a chisel made of flint stone, a spatula used in emptying the skull and extracting the brain, and needles to sew the openings and wounds. The scissor, the cutter, the forceps, the brush, and the puncher were all used as well. The body was washed internally with palm wine and dried with salt, and after it's totally dry, either by the sun or by being placed in ovens, it's stuffed with linen soaked in resin and sawdust to take a normal shape. Then it's totally ointed with aromatic oil and liquid resin. Wrapping the body with linen comes as a last step in this long, sophisticated process of mummification. The number of wraps differs according to the financial capability of the deceased. Mummification is one of the miracles of the civilization makers, and even modern science is incapable of solving its mystery until today. The reference to the other world happened in the Old Kingdom by pointing out to the other afterlife celestial world, then in the coffin's text in the Middle Kingdom, and finally the picture was completed in the New Kingdom through many religious books that spread since the New Kingdom until the Ptolemaic period. These different religious books were treasures decorating the walls and ceilings of the tombs and the sides and the covers of the wooden and stone coffins. They were also recorded on the religious papyrus rolls throughout the various ancient Egyptian eras. These books are considered our most important sources of the nature of the afterlife as the ancient Egyptian imagined it, and through which we can form a complete picture about the nature of that world and the journey of the deceased in it, and the difficulties which he expects to encounter during his journey in it. The ancient Egyptian imagined the universe composed of 3 areas, which are the sky and the earth and the back sky, or the nether world. He imagined the sky Bet lying over the ground Ta, and it has an equal that lies under the ground, known as the nether world or Nenenet, which is one of the names of that kingdom that lies under the ground, the kingdom of the dead, known as Duat. The world of the living lies in between the boundaries of that universe, for it's bounded by the earth in the lower part and the sky on top, and inside it the cycle of the daily life happens and is connected with the sunrise and the sunset. Behind this universe exists the eternal water Noon, which is a dark water ocean that's not alive and stretches to infinity. This world that lies beyond the limits of the human's visions and experiences played a big and important role in the creed of the Egyptians and was connected with the idea of the resurrection and rebirth and the renovation of life to whatever existed once upon a time in the real world.